medical food in this bill in a very specific way. It has to be furnished pursuant to a prescription order recommendation for the dietary management excuse me, of a covered disease or condition. It has to be specially formulated and processed. It can be for partial or exclusive feeding. It can be consumed orally or by a tube, and it has to be intended for dietary management, which cannot be achieved by the modification of a normal diet alone, and it needs to be under medical supervision. So what is not considered a medical food under the bill would be foods designed to reduce the risk of a disease or medical condition, gluten-free foods, foods for diabetes, those types of things. So the Patients and Providers for Medical Nutrition Equity Coalition is currently about 35 organizations, and we recognize that there's been a lot of work trying to get this type of legislation passed for a number of years. But the coalition was formed about a year ago to really try and bring all those separate efforts together under one umbrella, coordinate things so that we could really make a concerted push to get this done. So the bill covers inherited metabolic disorders, as I said, medical and surgical conditions of malabsorption, and a number of other specifically defined conditions. It covers adults and children, and it would cover those insured by private insurance, Medicaid, CHIP, Medicare, and the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program. What's not listed there is TRICARE, because we got it covered under TRICARE about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. So this bill would push the coverage to nearly every other insurance plan that can be covered at the federal level. So it really creates a floor of federal coverage for medically necessary foods and vitamins. If many states have their own laws on the books, and this wouldn't supersede those laws, it would just create a floor. So states can always pass laws that are more comprehensive or better. Where we are in this process is that we have currently about 32 co-sponsors of the bill in the House, and we have 4 co-sponsors in the Senate. The Congress is ending on December 31st, and so whatever support we build up for the bill, that bill then goes away, and then January 7th, or when Congress comes back, we have to work on reintroducing a new bill with a new set of co-sponsors. So we need to end this Congress with as strong a list of co-sponsors as we possibly can have, because we will be asking all those members who co-sponsor the bill now to come back on as a co-sponsor early next year when we reintroduce it. And at least theoretically, if you're able to get somebody on board as a co-sponsor in one Congress, it's a lot easier to then get them back on board in a new Congress. So we want to start off the new Congress really strong and introduce the bill with a very strong list of co-sponsors that we can then build from. So we're focusing right now on identifying a new Democrat lead for the bill, the House Democrat lead. The current House Democrat lead, John Delaney, who's a Democrat from Maryland, is not coming back in the next Congress because he is running for president. You'll be hearing a lot more about him, I'm sure. So we have to find a new Democrat lead, and we're talking to Mr. Delaney about who he would recommend, and the House Republican co-sponsor, Jamie Herrera Butler, about who she would like to work with. So there should be news on that soon, but we don't have an announcement to make on that yet. We'll reintroduce the bill early in the 116th Congress, hopefully, as I said, with a list of most of the current co-sponsors that we have. And then for most of 2019, we'll be focusing on building that co-sponsor list back up. And it's really important that we have bipartisan. We have equal number of Republicans and Democrats on board. So we can't just kind of go out to every member of Congress. We have to be a little bit more strategic about that. We'll also be focused on trying to get a hearing on the bill early in the next year. We are going to have a Hill Day for the coalition, and this will be actually announced. You guys are getting a preview of this. Nobody else knows this yet. We have a coalition call this afternoon, but we are going to have a Hill Day on May 6th and 7th in Washington, D.C. So that will be open to anyone who wants to come to D.C. We'll set up meetings for you and give you the message and train you on the message, and then you can go talk to your members of Congress and ask them to co-sponsor the bill. And then Congresses last for 2 years, so in 2020 is when we'll focus on trying to get this passed, assuming we're able to build a solid list of co-sponsors up. So you can sign up for action alerts and share your story on the coalition's website, which is medicalnutritionequity4.us. Again, medicalnutritionequity4.us, and that'll take you to the coalition's website. You can see what we're working on, see some of the resources that we have, and sign up to receive action alerts and share your story. That's all I have. I don't know, what do you need me to do to turn it back to you guys?
Oh, no, I got it. Thanks, Megan.
Sure.
Thank you so much. So we have John Richardson and Erica Ramos with the National Society of Genetic Counselors on the line to present on the access.
Hi, this is Erica.
Great.
Hi, so thank you guys so much for having us today. John's going to be doing most of the talking, but I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Erica Ramos, and I'm the current president of the National Society of Genetic Counselors. Through 2018, we'll have a new president at the beginning of next year named Amy Sturm. I am a former employee of Illumina and did a lot of work with their rare disease group, so I'm very familiar with RDLA and the great work that you guys do, and we really appreciate you talking to us today. John's going to present a little bit about our bill, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. So we have a bill. It's HR 7083, the Access to Genetic Counselor Services Act. And what that would do is it improve access to genetic counselors under the Medicare statute. Today, genetic counselors are not a recognized practitioner under the Social Security Act. So this bill would essentially solve that issue. So basically, the bill would allow services to be provided by a genetic counselor under Part B of Medicare, and the genetic counselor would be reimbursed. They would be reimbursed at 85% of what physicians currently are reimbursed at. Today, physicians and nurse practitioners and some others that have this type of a service underneath their scope of practice, they're actually able to provide it and be reimbursed. And so we're not asking for a new covered benefit, which is a pretty big deal in terms of potential costs or savings. And so if you're a genetic counselor that's licensed in a state, and there's 25 states that currently license genetic counselors as independent practitioners, those folks would be allowed to see patients and be reimbursed. If you're in a state without licensure, the Secretary of HHS would actually set the criteria through regulation as to who qualifies as a genetic counselor. We believe it'll be ABGC certification that would allow people to provide these services in states without licensure, because that's basically the key component for all the state licensure acts out there. They would basically build a service using either a genetic counselor code or an evaluation and management code. Again, we'll create a mechanism so the service can actually be tracked, so CMS will know whether a genetic counselor is providing it or whether one of these other practitioners is providing it. And so that piece of it is really important, because today under they have to deliver services. If they're going to deliver services to a Medicare beneficiary, they have to deliver them under what's called Incident 2 rules. And this creates significant access barriers. There's a couple reasons for that, but one is that a patient would need to be established where the genetic counselor is in order to see the genetic counselor. And oftentimes we find it that it's not necessary to establish the patient first within that hospital or that private practice, because oftentimes the genetic counselor service should actually be the first service. So that's very inefficient in of itself. The other thing is that if you have a medical facility like a hospital or a physician practice that doesn't have a genetic counselor on staff, it's very unlikely that those practices and those hospitals would refer to a genetic counselor at another practice or healthcare facility, because again, the patient would need to be established first by a physician at the place where they're being referred. And because physicians don't want to lose their patients to that other practice or hospital, those referrals don't take place. And so what we see happen is that the physician or a nurse practitioner tries to provide genetic counseling. There's lots of data that demonstrates that when you have a non-genetic professional involved in the testing process, that the quality of the service goes significantly down in terms of the right test is not ordered. It could be the test isn't the most appropriate for that individual. It might be more appropriate to test a family member. And then on the backside of testing, oftentimes tests will be misinterpreted, if not by a genetics specialist. So that's really important to make sure that when these genetic services are being delivered, a genetics professional is involved, and this will certainly help increase access to those professionals like a genetic counselor. The other key point, because we are talking about Medicare, so why should folks really care about this bill if they're not kind of within that Medicare population? And it's a very good question. The issue there is that a lot of hospitals have in their bylaws that in order to be a credentialed provider at that institution, you not only need to be licensed, but you also need to be recognized by Medicare. So the CMS recognition will help a great deal with increasing access to patients that might have just private third-party payer insurance, because what we'll find happen is that those genetic counselors that are not credentialed today will be able to be credentialed if we enact this legislation. So in terms of access in general, this legislation will be super important and should help allow more institutions hire genetic counselors, and those that have them will allow them to deliver services much more efficiently so they can see many more patients in a day than they currently do now. And so we're hopeful to get some broad-based support. We introduced it obviously just a few weeks ago or a month ago, and we did that just to buy us about 2 months of really rigorous outreach to folks like you. Rather than doing this in January, we figured why waste the time now. We've done a lot of work with the committees of jurisdiction, so the House Ways and Means Committee. We spent a lot of time on this legislation. They helped draft the bill. They've been quite supportive in the past. We believe that they'll be quite supportive in the future. One thing to also mention is because we're talking about more appropriate testing, this bill should actually save money, which is obviously another key feature. We are currently in the queue to have the Congressional Budget Office score this. And again, we think we'll have a better chance of getting that score with a bill introduced than not. So in the next month or so, we'll be really trying to push the committee hard to try to get a score out of the Congressional Budget Office. And then obviously we will turn around and reintroduce in the new Congress with a strong bipartisan group of original co-sponsors. So right now we're really just trying to do some outreach to patient advocacy groups and some other provider groups, hospitals, medical institutions, so that if you have an interest, certainly let us know, and Shannon can send you all my email address. We do have a draft endorsement letter, a bill summary, some talking points, and some additional background documents that we'd be happy to share with you all. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to present this important legislation.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, please feel free to contact me if you'd like any of that information from John. I can connect to you. Just a reminder that the phone lines are unmuted, and we're getting a little bit of feedback on the phone line. So if you could mute your phone if you haven't, that would be very much appreciated. Next, we actually have Ashley Valentine. She's the co-founder and president of Sickle Cell. Who will be discussing the sickle cell disease and other heritable blood disorders research, surveillance, prevention, and treatment here our office.
Is that how you say it?
Mute your phones because I hear some chatter. All right, Ashley.
Okay. Hi, thank you. So I'm Ashley Valentine from Sickle Cell. We're a sickle cell disease advocacy nonprofit, and I'm here today to talk about the legislation that we have in the House right now, and we're working in collaboration with the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America as well. So today I'm just going to tell you about our ask and a brief timeline of the bill and the significance of the bill and a little bit about sickle cell. So the immediate need is we need advocates and allies and people to contact their House members and ask them to consider S-2465 for a vote this year. And if we go to the next slide, the timeline of the bill is that this bill was introduced to the House in 2017 by Representative Danny Davis from Illinois, and he actually reintroduced this bill in 2009. So it's been a very long time in the House, and with a joint effort from the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, the community, and the American Society for Hematology, they were able to pass this bill to the Senate on February 28th, where Senators Booker and Scott introduced a companion bill, the S-2465. The companion bill was able to pass the Senate with the addition of new language. So we know that rarely disease-specific legislation is passed through the Senate. So in order to pass this bill, we added sickle cell disease and other heritable blood disorders to the bill. The understanding is that we will focus majority of the funding on sickle cell disease, but also to incorporate other heritable disorders where it makes sense. So now the bill is back in the House so that the House can consider the bill for a vote and reapprove the new language. And this will be the last step before the bill can be signed into law. So we need to make sure that this bill is considered for a vote in 2018. Because if in 2019 with the new House, we'll have to start the process over again. For the next slide. So the significance of the bill, it's pretty basic actually, if you think about it. So sickle cell disease hasn't received federal funding or a large amount of federal funding since the 60s. And so this bill reauthorizes the Sickle Cell Disease and Prevention Treatment Grants through HRSA, and it would allow $4.5 million a year to select entities between the years of 2019 and 2023. It also authorizes the CDC to have a surveillance program for sickle cell disease. Right now, there's no national data on sickle cell disease, so we don't know who has sickle cell disease, how many people have sickle cell disease. Newborn screening didn't begin in every single state until the last state started in 2006, and we hear that other states weren't sending home results until 2008. So there's many people with sickle cell, and we don't know where they are, and they're not being reported on a U.S. statistic. So this legislation would start to allot money so that the CDC can begin this surveillance program. And then it would allow entities to start collecting other national data on sickle cell disease to improve the quality of care for people living with sickle cell disease and help educate providers about the condition. And then my last slide here is just a little bit about sickle cell. So sickle cell is the most common genetic blood disorder in the world. In the U.S., it impacts about 100,000 Americans. It's a pretty severe disease. Its hallmark complication is pain, but it leads to other complications like stroke and bone death and heart failure, and shortens life expectancy significantly for people living with sickle cell disease. The annual cost for sickle cell disease is an estimate of $1 billion. Some say $500 million annually for the government. And just thinking about anecdotally, a good chunk of the population receives hip replacements. We just experienced my brother receiving a hip replacement, and that cost our family about $20,000 out of pocket for the first 6 months of the year. So that's a common situation for sickle cell disease. There's 2 FDA-approved drugs for sickle cell. One was approved in 2017, and prior to that, the last one was approved in 1998. And the last time this bill received funding was between 2004 and it expired in 2009, and it's been in Congress. It's been in the House since 2009, and prior to that funding, it was under Richard Nixon that sickle cell disease received federal funding in the 60s. So this is a pretty important piece of legislation, and we're hoping to get it through. This is the fastest it's ever moved through Congress, so it's pretty important that we can get it over the finish line now. And my last slide is just some sources, if anyone would like to read more about sickle cell disease.
Just focuses in more on research. We kind of leave the advocacy to like the partners.
Someone is talking on the phone line right now. If they could mute their phone.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if that was one of like their goals as a partner, is that something that Inspire would be okay with? I would imagine yes.
Just some ways to reel her in.
Are you interested in them?
Let me send out a reminder on the.
And I just wanted to learn more.
Yeah, everyone on the phone, if you can please mute your lines if you're not speaking. Unfortunately, our WebEx technology does not allow us to mute all the lines and still hear our speakers, so please mute your phones. Thank you.
Or just stop talking.
Yeah.
Next, we have Jennifer Bernstein from Horizon Government Affairs to talk about what happened just, was that last week? It seems like forever ago, actually, in the midterm elections. So Jennifer, please take it away.
Sure, thank you. For those of you who are participating on the phone, I know the slides are not advancing in the PowerPoint, so I will let you know when I'm switching slides, and you can just manually switch them on the left panel to stay with me. So I'll start with the title. Well, I'll skip past the title slide and move to slide, it's labeled 19. And it's sort of a snapshot of the elections by the numbers. And so I have to apologize to Shannon because as races have been called sort of over the last few days, I've been sending her updates of these slides and they keep changing. So right now we are at 228 Dem seats in the House, 198 GOP seats, and 33 gains for the Democrats. The Senate is split at 51-47, and we're still waiting for the outcomes of a couple of key races. Florida went to recount. Georgia, we're not really sure what's going on in Georgia. And then there's going to be a runoff in Mississippi. So it won't change, the results of that won't change much. This is pretty much what we're going to look at here. Important to note also at the state level that there were 7 governorships that flipped from R to D. And just I'll go over those really quickly in case you're on the line from any of those states. It's Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Maine, and then we're still waiting on Georgia and Florida. So the interesting thing about this election for me is that the number of people who actually went out and voted was really impressive for midterm. Where the House races are concerned, the Democrats had about 54.1 million votes, and that translates to about 51.7% of total vote. Republicans had about 48.7 million votes. So you could see We're still pretty evenly divided. Let's move on to the next slide. And so what happened? All right, Republicans have expanded control of the Senate. Still waiting on some races, but again, that's not going to change. Democrats have the House, so we've got a divided Congress. What does that really mean? We can flip to the next slide. It means that we're not expecting a lot to happen. We have to get through the lame duck this year, and we have to get through leadership elections, which I'll get into in a minute. There's a couple of must-pass bills on budget and appropriations, a farm bill, flood insurance, maybe some technical fixes to the tax package, and then a big question mark on health care. We think right now that the lame duck package is probably going to be somewhat small, although there's a chance that it might expand, so we will keep you updated about what kind of health care provisions we might see included in that. Heading into the next Congress, I do expect that the House will be very focused on investigations. I'll get into that in a minute. The Senate, I'm not really sure what the Senate priorities are going to be. I don't expect a lot of agreement between the two chambers and the White House on issues, but there are some issues in which I think there can be some consensus built around. So on this slide with administration health care priorities, that should really kind of be overall healthcare priorities, because I think R's and D's can get around some of these issues relating to value, which Sloan's going to be talking about in a minute, drug pricing, more focus on opioids, and then continued efforts on health insurance reform. Let's go down to the next slide. These are all predictions. Nothing has been decided at this point, but I want everybody to get a good look at what the Senate and House leadership teams might look like, so that you know who you're going to have to be working with in the next Congress. The Republican side, there's not really any surprises over there, nor really on the D side. We will update this list as information becomes available and have it available for everybody. The next slide on Senate Finance and Health Committees, obviously focusing on those because those two committees have most of the impact on the issues that you care about. So we are looking at a couple of changes, particularly to Finance. Senator Grassley is probably going to move over and chair that committee. Caskell and Nelson are gone. Heller is gone, and Hatch, as we all know, is retiring. So there'll be some membership changes to Finance. And as far as the Health Committee goes, we're looking at Senator Alexander as chairman, and then Murray as ranking, likely. We will again revisit that once the elections are actually all tallied up and we know who's in and who's out, and we'll provide updated lists for everybody there. Moving on to House leadership, I think we're looking at Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer again at the top of the food chain. Majority Whip, we might see DeGette in that position, which I know a lot of us have worked with her office in the past, particularly on cures. On the Republican side, it's either going to be McCarthy or Jordan at the top of the food chain, and then Scalise is Minority Whip. There's a correction to this slide. Kathy McMorris-Rogers has actually taken her name out of consideration for conference chair, so it looks like that spot will go to Liz Cheney. But again, this is all, we're just predicting right now, and once this information is finalized, we will make it available for everyone. Moving on to the next slide, the committee structure in the House is going to change. So let's take a look at ways and means. The ratios will flip. So with the new Democratic majority, the ratios will flip from where they are now to favor Democrats on the committees. I want to draw your attention to Energy and Commerce, so likely chair. I think we're pretty certain it will be Congressman Pallone. Mimi Walters, I think that race was called and she's in, so that should be corrected as well at the bottom of the Energy and Commerce list. I have heard, if you want to flip over, actually I don't have a slide for that. I have heard that Anna Eshoo is, theoretically, she should be the next chairperson for the Health Subcommittee on Energy and Commerce. I've heard some very unsubstantiated rumors that DeGette might be interested in challenging that. I'm not sure if she will. DeGette right now is slated to be the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee Chair on E&C. Anna Eshu has the seniority. I think she'll probably wind up as Subcommittee Chair of Health Sub, but we will update that again once all the leadership elections and all the committee spots are filled out within the next few weeks. And I know that's a lot of information to go over, and some of this is evolving. We'll make it all available once the details have been finalized. But in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, my contact information is there. Feel free to email me or give me a call. And if you want to get into specifics on any of this, we can definitely do that offline. And Shannon, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Next is Sloan Salzberg, Vice President at Horizon Government Affairs, to discuss value-based arrangements.
Thanks so much. So as Jennifer kind of just alluded to, I think folks hopefully have been hearing about some news regarding drug prices. It's always harder to do these things on the phone because I like to see people's reactions when I ask about that. And so, you know, as most folks will know, there's been kind of a traditional tug of war between, honestly, between biopharmaceutical companies and then the payers, the insurers, and the PBMs, with the patients kind of caught in the middle saying, hey, I'm down here, I'm the one that needs to be taking these drugs, if I even have a drug, and I want to make sure that I can access those drugs. And so while all this has been kind of fought over in the headlines, one of our coalitions at Horizon Government Affairs is called the Council for Affordable Health Coverage. And so we were launched back in 2001 around trying to reduce the cost of health coverage for all Americans. And our membership is purposefully very broad. So we have pharma companies, we've got large employers and small employers, we have providers, we've got patient and consumer groups, as well as payers. And so we all kind of sit around at the table and we started to say, as this drug pricing debate was raging, hey, can CHE kind of come and bring consensus around maybe a core issue? Can we come up with some kind of policy that doesn't pit one industry against another industry, but that actually brings everybody cohesively together around a solution? And so lo and behold, it took 2 years, but we were able to come around a solution around value-based arrangements. And so I have a slide. I know no one can see these right now, but when they get sent out later, I have a slide that just kind of gives a broad overview of what value-based arrangements are. And so at their basic, value-based arrangements are when you base reimbursement or payment on outcomes. And those outcomes can kind of range from clinical outcomes, biomarkers, you know, if you're diabetic, A1C levels, to more kind of process measures. You know, if we have a heart medication and we're guaranteeing that nobody's going to have a heart attack on that, did you have a heart attack? Also, sometimes they use medication adherence measures. So, you know, if the patient is continuing to fill this prescription, we're going to assume that it's working. So we'll pay you back on it. And so what these are, they're kind of popping up around other things other than drugs. And so you've heard about accountable care organizations and medical homes. Those are all types of value-based arrangements where you're paying for the value received. And so these really come down to a single drug, and it's really a contract or an arrangement between the manufacturer of that drug and then the insurer or the payer. And they come around, they sit at the table, and they say, hey, we have this drug, we're going to guarantee, you know, you have a heart condition, that this is going to keep patients from having a heart attack. Or if anyone just saw, you know, there's a new blindness cure out there, I think it's called Luxturna, that's basically an injection, and it's going to cure blindness. So, you know, we're guaranteeing that this drug is going to cure blindness, and if it does not, if the patient ends up going, you know, has macular degeneration or whatever it is, then you'll get a refund. Right now, these things are kind of going on in the private sector. We just had AstraZeneca actually join our coalition, they have 37 going on right now in the private sector. The problem is in federal health programs, so you think Medicare, Medicaid, federal health employee benefits, these are not going on. And so there's barriers that are kind of keeping these from happening, and they're pricing barriers. And so there's something called Medicaid best price. So basically it says that whatever the drug, the best price that this manufacturer gives the drug out to any payer in the United States, they have to then provide that price to all of Medicaid. This is obviously kind of creating some artificial floors on drugs. And so say I have an arrangement around a drug and I say, if it doesn't work, I'm going to give you 100% rebate. You're going to get that drug for free. Well, that would mean that they would have to give that drug for free to everyone in Medicaid. And so obviously, manufacturers are not going to do that. And so best price is one of the barriers. The other barrier is the anti-kickback statute, which is basically under current statute, some pay-for-result discounts negotiated under a value-based contract might be construed by the Office of the Inspector General as unlawful because they would be considered an inducement under anti-kickback. And so you need to protect these from anti-kickback. And then another thing, there's been some regulations coming out of FDA around manufacturers' communications with payers prior to the drug's approval. They've said that these are okay, but there's been movement on the Hill to try and get these kind of put into statute as well. And so we have a bill. It has not actually been introduced yet. We are working right now on the Senate with Senators Cassidy and Warner. And Cassidy's a Republican from Louisiana. Warner's a Democrat from Virginia. Hopefully the bill will be introduced at the end of November. And what the bill does is it defines what these value-based arrangements are in statute. It then exempts these from Medicaid best price and creates a safe harbor for the anti-kickback statute for value-based arrangements and also for medication adherence programs. And adherence is really kicked in when if you think that if a company is going to be on the hook for outcomes, they want to make sure that the patient's actually taking the drug as prescribed and that the poor outcome is not because the patient didn't take it or they couldn't afford it or whatever it is. And so you need to protect these adherence programs as well because folks want to give these away for free, but they would trigger anti-kickback because they would be seen as something of value. The other kind of good thing that I forgot to mention is because you have these kind of traditional, I don't want to call them enemies, but you've got the payers and the pharma guys who have different reasons for being in existence, right? And they're coming to the table around a drug and saying, we want to negotiate price around this drug. We want to do a pay for performance. We want to make sure that the patient's actually taking the drug. Well, when you have that kind of keyed in where you obviously want the patient to take the drug as prescribed, one of the biggest barriers for medication non-adherence is cost. And so a lot of these value-based arrangements are actually lowering out-of-pocket costs for patients to zero or to much lower than they would be if they weren't in a value-based arrangement. So that's another really kind of good thing that patients can see. As soon as these are enabled, they can really actually see these, see the benefits of these in their pocketbooks. So right now we are looking for additional support from this bill. We have our own kind of groups that support it, but I was talking to Jen and she said we should present this to RDLA and Every Life and talk to you guys about it. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, if you want to see the language. We are up on the Hill all the time. Would love y'all's support. And then I'll leave you with one last kind of parting tidbit, is that we have an economist on staff that actually used to work at the Congressional Budget Office, which is the entity in Congress that scores bills, so they say whether or not a bill will save money or cost money. And so he went through this, and he thinks that our bill will actually save $2.8 billion over 10 years, and we have this study that kind of shows his thinking there. So, I'm pitching this as a unicorn policy around drug pricing. It has the support from industry, both the pharma and the payer side. It has support from patient and consumer groups, and it saves money. So would love y'all's support. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Sloan. I'm going to give just a quick update on Rare Disease Week. I know many of you are very familiar with it. It takes place February 24th to 28th next year, in just a couple of months. And as you probably all know, rare disease patients, caregivers, advocates will come to DC and learn how to become advocates and then go on the Hill for a lobby day. It is free for all advocates to attend and participate. So if you are interested, and there's a list of the week's events, which include a documentary screening, the legislative conference where you learn about all of the different policy issues and how to become an advocate on Capitol Hill, our lobby day, a rare disease congressional caucus briefing, and a rare artist reception, and then Rare Disease Day at NIH is the final event of the week. So to help advocates from across the country be able to come to DC, the Every Life Foundation has a travel stipend program to help offset the cost. Every Life awards 2 travel stipends per state, limit 1 per family, and it's a $400 travel stipend for Maryland and Virginia, $800 for the rest of the continental United States, and $1,000 for Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. And the application actually ends December 13th, so you have a few more weeks if you are interested. The application is at rareadvocates.org/RDW, and folks will hear by December 21st whether they will receive a travel stipend or be placed on the wait list. If you are from North Dakota, Alaska, Colorado, Connecticut, Minnesota, Nebraska, New Mexico, Oregon, South Dakota, Vermont, Washington, or Wyoming, we ask you, if you are interested in coming for Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill, to apply for a travel stipend. Those are states which we have not received many applications from, and we want to make sure that we have at least those 2 representatives from every state here on Capitol Hill when everyone goes to the Hill to lobby their members. So we've received 299 travel stipends so far, but if you're from one of those states, it would be great if you applied if you're interested, and we can make sure that we have enough people from every state for our lobby day. And of course, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or anyone else here at Every Life Foundation if you have questions about Rare Disease Week or the travel stipends. Just final is we'll be holding a webinar in December on Rare Disease Week on December 12th, and then our next RDLA meeting will take place in 2018 on Thursday, January 17th. So thank you so much, everyone, for your patience today with the conference line and the webinar. I apologize, and we're hoping for better next time. So thank you so much.
Questions for the speakers?
Can you repeat the scholarship rates again?
The travel stipends? Sure. It's $400 for Maryland and Virginia. It's $800 for the rest of the continental United States, and $1,000 for Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico. Did you have a question for someone?
Is John still on the phone? John Richardson with Genetic Counselors.
John, are you still on the line?
Yep, I am.
Hey, John, this is Max with Audentes Therapeutics. I just had a question about your bill. As I'm wondering, what are the implications here for Medicaid? I mean, would they be eligible for any kind of coverage under this bill?
Yeah. It's a good question. It won't directly affect Medicaid. Today, as you all probably have experience with, Medicaid's kind of a hodgepodge of policies. So some states cover genetic counseling today by a genetic counselor. Other states are again kind of covering it but not paying a genetic counselor, and other states might kind of not have much in terms of policies at all. We believe that this, if we were able to enact this, this will really help push states to actually follow suit. Again, I think we have a pretty strong cost argument in that if you look at the inappropriate testing, it's upwards of 30%. And again, this is peer-reviewed research. There's a program in Michigan by Priority Health where they actually costed out the genetic counseling versus the savings and the tests, and it was a net $7 million, and that's just one small little regional payer. So I think that will really resonate at the state level with state Medicaid policy folks. So I think it'll help a great deal improve those policies as well.
Okay. I mean, what I would suggest is if it's really cost saving, then if you were to expand it to Medicaid as well, in theory, it would actually increase the cost savings further. So I would urge you guys to think about that as you introduce in the next Congress.
Yeah, we would, and I would be open to your thoughts. I mean, part of it is, mandating state Medicaid, and sometimes that doesn't go over all that well, but it's certainly something we can definitely consider.
Cool.
I have a question for John also. I was wondering, do you guys have any perspectives as far as who a 2019 sponsor will be for this bill?
Yeah, good question. Well, yeah, as you all kind of alluded to earlier in terms of the committee makeup, in terms of Ways and Means, I mean, there's going to be significant new membership kind of on both sides of the aisle. So we're looking at potential new members. There's a couple members on the Republican side that have some interest, so we'll be talking to those guys. On the Democratic side, I think we have, again, a couple people in terms of Ways and Means. So we'll be having, 4 kind of principal original co-sponsors, 2 from Ways and Means, 2 from Energy and Commerce. Representative Lovesack of Iowa will kind of be the lead champion in the new Congress, we believe, and then we'll find him some folks from Energy and Commerce and Ways and Means. But, it's to be determined. We'll be working hard on that in the next month.
Hey, John, it's Jennifer Bernstein over at Horizon Government Affairs. Can you contact me offline? Because I would be interested in helping you strategize on this. And we are, all over both of those committees. So to the extent that I can be helpful, please let me know. And then also, if anybody cares, while I was doing my slides, literally the Senate was voting on their leadership. So all my slides, pretend you didn't see them because they're totally outdated now. But just as a FYI, Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer were reelected by voice vote to lead both their parties. And then Todd Young is now going to chair the NRSC. And just going through my list here, John Thune is now going to be the party whip for the Republicans. Roy Blunt will be the Republican policy chairman. And then with Hatch retiring, the president pro temp is now going to be Grassley, who is, as nobody's surprised about, the most senior GOP senator. So I'll update the slides and have those available, but those votes just happened within the last half hour.
A question for John, please. This is Joe Murphy. Do you have any estimate on the appropriations necessary to carry out the bill if successful?
So if successful, it should actually be a cost saver. So we're talking about mandatory spend, so there'd be no appropriations associated with it. It'd be basically on the Medicare spend side. We had Dobson and Devanza do a cost study on it about 4 years ago. They identified upwards of $4 billion over 10 years in savings. And then we had a UCLA economist who's head of their public policy department. He updated it last year and increased those potential savings upwards of $6.5 billion. So we're talking about real money here.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more quick question?
How about one more, and then it'll be 1 o'clock, so.
This will be quick. Sloan, are you still on the phone?
I'm still here.
Sloan, it's Max. Just a question about the value-based legislation. In terms of the proposed scope of the bill, would these kinds of agreements apply across all drugs, biologics, or how are you guys thinking about scoping it?
That's a good question. Right now it's across all drugs, including biologics. I was just in there last week with Cassidy's office, and they, other folks have been meeting with them, so we're hearing that they are potentially going to add in language around including devices as well. I don't know where they're going with that. Our kind of opinion is we'd like a more targeted approach, and so they're supposed to be sharing the most updated language with me this week, so I can follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all, and we will meet again in January. Thank you so much.